Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Pontiac. I just want to say on behalf of the Clarence Phillips Ascend Foundation, T.R.U.T.H Coalition, as well as CNS Healthcare, we are proud to be able to bring you this event this evening, something that we think is absolutely crucial and important to make sure we get a full understanding of what's truly taking place out here in the world of mental health, especially amongst our children. Right now, we're living in a truly trying time where there's so much uncertainty taking place out here, where it is our job to get a better understanding of how we need to go ahead and be in place to make sure our kids are going to be taken care of and they're going to be covered. And that's the reason why we have this event here this evening. We have some amazing kids that we have that's going to be joining us on this computer screen tonight, and they're going to go ahead and try and give us a good educational lesson, a master class on mental health. And also, too, to go ahead and make sure we truly capture the whole dynamic of the evening, we want to go ahead and make sure we brought you two absolute professionals this evening. Those professionals are going to be Dr. Melanie Woods as well as Mr. Tyler Logan. Both of them are going to go ahead and be able to give you a professional side of what's taking place out here from a mental health standpoint, and also, too, some of the things that we need to be aware of as we look to move forward to fight through some of these mental health challenges. So with all that being said, we want you to go ahead, sit back, enjoy the evening. Please feel free to share and invite everybody in humanly imaginable, because we want everyone to go ahead and share in this educational lesson. And please open up your mind and make sure we listen to our kids, because their voice absolutely matters in this, and they're going to go ahead and let us know some of the things that we think that we know that we need to know a little bit more about. So everybody sit back and enjoy.
I am your host, Michaela Powell-Moore.
And I'm Brian Becks, and we would like to welcome you to our panel for today.
We would like to welcome you to the Ascend Foundation T.R.U.T.H Coalition Mental Health Forum. And I have the honor to serve as one of your facilitators this Sunday evening. And we all appreciate you joining us for this evening as well. And I would like to pass it over to our co-facilitator, Brian Becks.
Hi, I'm Brian Becks, and would like to get it started with our panel for today. First, we have Lauren McNear. Next, we have Madison Jones. Third, we have Jamari Wiggins. And fourth, we have Amare Barbie. Welcome, guys. So with our first question, I would like to go with Lauren. And I think most, if not all of you guys are in high school today. So my first question is, what kind of mental health issues do you see among your peers in school or just around you in general?
That is a great question. So at least around me, all my peers, well, not all of them, but most of them have anxiety and depression. Those are like the two main things that I see them battling with every day. And it's just hard sometimes. Like, some people have it worse than others. It's not the same everywhere you go.
Okay. Jamari, would you like to add anything to this question?
I definitely feel like there's a lot of stress that's going around just because of just like how the world is right now. And it's really hard for us, some high schoolers, like she said.
So going in with our second question, I would like to start off with Madison. What is it like being an African-American teen and, having to deal with mental health? How do you think you're viewed as from your peers or your parents or anybody? How do you deal with that?
So I think personally there's like a stigma around being an African-American teen and what can happen to you. So there's a lot of different examples of people comparing you to others and all this other stuff, and you just wonder, like, what could all these bad things that are going on happen to me? And
Lauren, would you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, adding on to that, I'd like to say that, like, being African American and dealing with mental health problems, first off, a lot of the time in the African American community, you see a lot of them saying that, like, mental health issues aren't real, and like just brushing it off as like it all in your head. And so it's like hit or miss with like the people in the community who actually like believe in this and believe that it is an illness. And so yeah, it's just hard sometimes, but thankfully I have a nice support system, and my family definitely understands that it is definitely a real illness, but everybody doesn't have that.
Well, thank you for letting us know that, Miss Lauren. Going on to question 3, I would like to ask Miss Amore, how is our mental health, how is your mental health right now with everything that happened in Oxford?
My mental health is on the rocky end. I it's like a wave. It keeps getting higher and higher and then it goes down, and it's really sad and tragic to think about all the students and knowing that that horrible incident could be my school, or someone I know could have got killed, or someone I know could have shot up the school.
I agree. I think the hardest part about this whole thing was that it really could have happened to any one of us in any one of our schools, because like it was literally like 20 minutes away from where I am, and it's like just crazy thinking about how close it is, because when you hear about school shootings you're like, oh, that's not around me, it's not going to happen here, and then it happened here, and it was just a real shock to I think everyone.
Yeah, I would also like to say that like I go to Lake Orion, so it's like right down the street from Oxford, and I just know a lot of people that went to Oxford and I go to Oxford, and I know it was definitely very like nerve wracking and very panicking for me to like text all my friends to make sure that they're like okay, because I didn't really know a lot about the situation at the time. You know, just knowing so many people from Oxford, it just definitely had me shaken up. So it's a challenge to get over that still.
So let me ask you this, guys. We all see, how different races can, quite frankly, get away with different things. You know what I mean? And so, what do you think would have happened, or do you think it would have happened at all if that kid walking into Oxford was a Black person, a Latino person, or any other race? Do you think it would have been able to happen that way? And this for anybody.
Honestly, with that, if it was a person of color, I don't think that they would have been walking out of that school alive. I honestly think that the police would have shot them down before they even were able to shoot that many people and injure that many people. I feel like a lot of people don't like to touch on this subject because it is a very sensitive one, but people of color are just treated differently than people who are Caucasian or white, and that's just how it is. Unfortunately, that's the world that we live in. Hopefully it changes soon, but yeah, they definitely wouldn't have walked out of there alive. Or like, even if it was in like say Pontiac School District, I don't even think that they would have been able to get a gun inside the school, because the security there is quite frankly better than it is at the suburban schools where most of the Caucasian kids go.
Would anybody else like to add on to that question? Thank you, Lauren.
I'd agree with everything she's saying, because if you think about it, a lot of this stuff wouldn't happen there compared to like my school in Bloomfield. We probably have maybe 2 security officers for our very large school at most. And so if something would have gone very differently, it wouldn't have been as much of, it wouldn't have dragged on for so long as it did, as long as it did.
Okay, for Amare, with the murder rates rising at a record in Pontiac, just how the rates are going up, how has this affected you and your circle of family and friends?
I I've always been cautious when it came to coming to Michigan because I'm originally from Ohio. And hearing about all you hear about from Michigan is just gang violence and murder rates. And especially having cousins who live in Pontiac, it's just very cautious. And having friends who live there, you're always checking up on them. anything goes wrong, you're just moment you're in their call, you're calling them, making sure they're okay. And especially the idea of them getting murdered makes every day almost sickening when thinking
Would
about them.
anyone like to add on to that? Thank you, Ms. Amore.
Yeah, like with the murder rates rising in Pontiac, it's just scary because you never know who's gonna be next, where it's gonna happen, and like she said, that's where I live, that's where my family lives, that's where a lot of my friends live, and so it's just nerve wracking because you never know when or where it's gonna happen, and it's quite frankly, it's terrible for our mental health to be living like constantly on edge, scared that something might happen to us.
So Jamari, I have a question for you. So this whole pandemic has had a grasp on everybody in different ways, and everybody is going through different things when it comes to the pandemic. So my question for you is, how has the pandemic as a whole, like how has that affected you and your inner circle?
No, me and my inner circle, it's basically just like us just like missing each other and missing having the social like interactions that you have at school and just being able to talk to people and have like a little break. And for everybody just to be, like locked inside your house for so long that like we were, and that we couldn't go outside to like play basketball with each other or just hang out and have friends. It definitely is just like the getting away from like the human interaction part. I would definitely say just like missing the human interaction.
I can feel that. I can feel that. I miss the interaction too, man. Amare, can you add something to that?
Yeah, it's definitely missing your friends and seeing them and only being able to talk through a screen, and then even sometimes they can't talk, so it's just you feel very alone.
So since we're on the topic of mental health, how did that have you feeling mentally, being in the house, not being able to see your peers? How did that have you mentally, Lauren?
Honestly, I've definitely seen my mental health like declining since the start of the pandemic, and like it got better for a minute there when everything like finally opened back up. But now that like I don't know, I just feel like it's getting worse again. Mental health, it comes in waves, and like COVID and everything definitely isn't helping, especially not in my household, because like a little under a month ago, I ended up getting COVID again for the second time. Crazy. And I was just like shocked, and I was like stuck on quarantine again. And I was so scared that my family would get it too. And I have my grandma lives with me, and I was scared that she would get like really sick from it as well. And it was just really nerve-wracking, and it definitely doesn't help our mental health or stress levels. Like honestly, mine were through the roof during my whole quarantine.
Wow.
Definitely the stress level. I feel like whenever going back into like I say like the real world, I'll just have like this stress of that like maybe they would have it and then I would get in, and who knows what would happen if I would get in. And then it was just like a big just hopefully I don't get in. Just I don't basically trust anybody else around me.
Well, it's very hard to be in COVID, so I feel every single last one of you on what you said. But I have a question for all of you, and anyone can answer. But how do you feel about being Black in America? Do you think that it's been the source of mental disparities that have caused so many people to spin out of control?
I think that more so recently, more than ever, it's kind of skyrocketed. Thinking you're not as safe as you were before, especially for me and like recent issues that's been going around in my school. And you'd think that we're in changing times and none of this stuff might happen anymore, but people are still like treating others differently as they shouldn't and stuff like that.
Yeah. At my
Yeah.
school, oh sorry, you can go.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. You got this.
Okay. At my school is predominantly white, and I personally have been called something that's outside of my name. And it's just the fact that they just think it's okay and that their parents think it's okay for that because they don't really get the chance to interact with other people outside of their, of their color. And when they see me, because there's not that many of like Black people at my school and African Americans. So when they see us, they already have like this bad stereotype that, oh, we want to do this, oh, we want to do that, when all we want to do is just learn and have the same opportunities as them. So I just feel like just like mentally, it's just like always like a strain of just like, oh, what are they going to say next about me? Or, oh, they probably think if I do this, like I'm just like every other typical person and stuff like that.
Okay.
And
Lauren.
it's kind of messed up because it's like you go to school and you feel like you shouldn't have to deal with things like that, and you do, and it's been happening for a long time, and it seems like it's not slowing down at all. So I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah, it's just crazy how all of this is still happening, even though like so many years ago, our ancestors literally fought for us to have equal rights and supposedly we got them, but clearly like a lot of things still haven't changed because we're still being called out of our names. We're still being treated differently just because of the color of our skin. And it's just terrible because like on top of being treated differently by everybody else, we also like have to live with that fear of like being like, how like being stopped by the police, like that's way scarier for us than like any of my peers. Like when I told them about, that talk that your parents give you once you like start driving and everything about what to do when the cops come, keep your hands up, don't talk back, don't get an attitude. All of my like Caucasian friends, they were like, what are you talking about? You don't have to do that. You didn't do anything wrong. Like you can just say what you want to say. And it's like, no, you can't. At least I can't because of the color of my skin. And it's just crazy.
So how does being African American affect you mentally? Like, how does it affect your mental health as a person? Because I know that a lot of us, we say that, us and our skin color, it's always going to be something or someone who says something, especially when it comes to the different race thing that goes around. But how does that affect you as a person mentally?
It can make you really stressed out because having to be wary of your surroundings every day is not something that you want to be facing all the time. So if you have to go around wondering what somebody might say to you, what somebody might do to you, it can really take a toll on you.
Yeah, I agree. Like just the anxiety and the stress that comes with being Black, I feel like not enough people like know about it or even like talk about it and bring light to it because like just being Black in America is a very stressful thing and constantly being on edge and worried about everything that may or may not happen because you never know, like people are crazy, they're unpredictable, you never know what's going to happen, and just all that stress and anxiety, it definitely builds up and it doesn't go away. And honestly, it gets worse as you get older because when I was younger, I didn't have nearly as much anxiety or stress because, we were just kids. We were just playing. Skin color didn't matter until it did. And, it just changed.
Hard thing to face in the real world once we get older.
So, are there any mental health issues that any of you guys go through that you would like to talk about today?
That's the biggest thing at this moment for me and probably for Lauren as well is all the pressure that people will put for you for school and for us applying to college at the moment. What do you want to do? What do you want to do for your future? It's like everybody wants you to do things now and they want you to make your decision right now. Like there won't be a chance to turn back and like everything you do now will have a big effect in the future. So it'll make you pretty stressed out.
Yeah, and I agree. Like I already had anxiety before all this like senior college stuff happened. And I swear that mine is just like building up. And honestly, I feel like I'm really close to like kind of like meeting my breaking point because like it's just so much anxiety about applying for colleges, getting scholarships, making sure that you apply for FAFSA, and like not even just like with college stuff, like just anxiety in general. Mine is like kind of bad. I have panic attacks every once in a while, but I have a support group who helps, like my friends who are on this call. Actually, a lot of them help me a lot when I get in one of those states where I can't think of anything else except for the worst. And so I'm very grateful for them for that.
So you think it really helps to have that support system around you?
Yes, it definitely does, because if they weren't there, I probably would have actually passed out. Like they literally stopped me from like passing out due to my panic attacks before.
I think having a support system is really for anyone. I mean, it doesn't matter where you are, because even if you feel like you aren't being affected mentally, you still need a support system around you, regardless or not, because somebody could be saying, oh, I'm the most happiest person and not be affected by anything, but still without a support system, you feel alone. And loneliness can cause you to be that way and just be upset and angry, and start to actually see some of the mental health issues that you said that you didn't have, and it starts to kind of come out and you start to notice it. So I feel like I agree with Lauren on that. Everyone needs a support system. Yeah.
Yeah, but adding on to that, like with COVID, because like for some people, their family isn't their support system, and that's okay. For some people, it's their friends. But like we were saying with COVID and everything, we're stuck in the house and we can't see our friends anymore. And so it just gets hard sometimes, especially for those people whose friends are like their main support system.
And anyone like to add on to what Lauren just said? Jamari, Amaray?
Honestly, I think she said it best. Having a support system is very important because different situations cause different things you haven't noticed in yourself to like arise, and to have like your friends to talk to is very important.
Well, that takes us to the next question. What do kids and teens, well, what do you guys, let's use you guys as a reference. What do you guys want from your parents when you're having mental health issues? Let's say someone's having an anxiety attack. What do you want your parents to do reaction wise, or what do you expect from them?
I would like them to listen and go what they go on from that, because every child is different, especially when it comes to mental health issues. And I notice like Black families and Black parents, they always think that they know best in what you're going through, and it's hard for them to listen. They're very stubborn, especially when it comes to something they don't understand, like mental health.
I completely agree. And like she said, like for me, yeah, I feel like them just listening and them just being there really helps. But for some people, like I know one of my close friends, for her, like her mom is kind of a helicopter parent. And so with her, when she's going through this, she just needs like more space. And so it really just depends on like the kid and your relationship with them and how it usually is. Because if you're usually like, talking to them and they like, talk back, and you have like a really nice relationship, like your friends, like, yeah, they'll definitely want you to like be there and listen. But yeah, it just depends on the child really and how they feel.
I think parents, when they say that, oh, I know you more than you know you. I know more about you than you know about yourself. And the thing is, the one thing that I wish that a lot of parents will understand is the way that we grew up and the way that our um, lives are now is very different from when they were our age. A lot of parents I've seen and noticed, a lot of parents try to use what they went through in the past and think that what we are going through is the same thing. And Not saying that none of our parents have ever had any mental health issues, because they probably have and we just don't know about it. But I would say that a lot of parents try to use their past and reflect it onto us and say that, how we got it, and nothing that we're feeling is really an issue. Sometimes it is an issue. And I know a lot of people who can't really reach out and talk to their parents and kind of use them as like a support system, be like, Mom, I'm going through this, or Dad, I'm going through this. And their parents are able to sit and listen and actually take in what they're saying, as in rather shut them down and tell them, oh, it's not that, you're just, making it up or something. So
Yeah, I agree. That really brings me back to what I was saying earlier with how a lot of African American parents, honestly, like they like to brush it off and like, brush off mental illness and be like, you're fine, you're just making it up, you just got to do this. This is what I did and it worked for me. But like they don't realize that we're not them, we're not the same person. What works for you may not work for me. And they sometimes they just don't understand that.
So if somebody's planning to have a conversation with their parents about their mental health state, what do you think are some good tips to start that conversation off with their parents? Or not even their parents, or just somebody that they trust, like their peers?
Honestly, I think that just being honest and being open would be like just a good tip, because if you're really struggling through whatever it is, I don't think you trying to make it any less of a big deal just because you may not feel like as comfortable, because you definitely feel comfortable enough to tell them about it. So I feel like if you explain it to them fully and then don't hold anything back, it can also lead to a better way for them to help you.
Madison, you want to add something to that?
I think to start the initial conversation off with your parents in this would probably just be to, or even like your friends and stuff, it'd be to address whatever issues going on. Because if it's somebody that you really trust, I'm sure they'll be understanding enough. And you just have to be able to find someone that you can really like take with you along with the journey,
Marae, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, even like if you're bad at communicating what you're actually feeling inside, I think it's best to start off with like a scenario of like a water bottle and you just keep filling it up, and whatever you're dealing with, use that example.
So I guess my biggest question is, what do you guys think that people get mixed up with mental health? What do you think, like, people, so say somebody hears mental health, what do you think is like the first thing that'll come to a person's mind if they're not really educated about it? Lauren?
With that, I feel like a lot of people who aren't educated about mental health, they only think that, like, I feel like a lot of them go straight to the extremes, like especially with like depression. Like a lot of people have depression, but like not everybody's suicidal. I feel like anytime like if somebody is like, oh, they have depression, they think, oh, they're gonna kill themselves, they need to get help and all this other stuff, and that's not the case 9 times out of 10. And so I feel like people just need to know that there are there are so many shades of gray when it comes to mental health, and you just gotta work with the person and see, like, get them to tell you what's going on in their head, and know that it's not always the worst, although it's not always the best either.
Anybody have anything to say about that?
I think some people might just think you're faking it to get more attention at some points, when like you could really be serious about it, but just because like they might say, oh no, you're just lying just so you can get more attention. Or some people probably think that like you're too, I could say, like perfect of a person to be able to get like actually like any type of like mental health, like depression or anxiety. So they might try to just blow it off, and then as it gets worse and worse, they just don't believe you until you actually need a point where you have to get help, or else something can go wrong.
great, great. I have a question for you all. Let's say if someone came into your school and said, I go to a therapist because of my mental health issues, how do you think they would be treated amongst your peers in the school?
Okay, honestly, now in this day and age, that is one thing that I can say has improved. Like, honestly, a lot of my peers actually do go to therapists and they get help for their mental issues, and they know that it is real and that it's okay to like definitely meet somebody to like talk it out with, whether it is a therapist or a friend or whatever it is. And so at like a lot of my peers are like really accepting of that, and they know that, there's nothing wrong with talking to somebody about it and going to see a therapist because they do help.
Do you think that now that you did have that situation that occurred in Oxford, do you think some of your peers may be on edge if someone said that kind of now after what happened?
Honestly,
Go ahead.
no, you can go this time. I went last time.
All right. Well, with that question, I feel like with everything that happened with Oxford, I feel like a lot more of them are going to get therapy. Like, not even just because of like, like thoughts of like shooting up the school, like, even though I don't think that many of them have those thoughts, but like a lot of them just needed therapy after like their shooting happened because their mental health took a swan dive down because, of stress and worry and anxiety and everything. And so a lot of my peers started going to get help and going to see a therapist after everything that happened.
Yeah. I know for my school, because we're so close to Oxford, that when we didn't have school the next following week, one of the days that we actually had to go to was just like a mental health check-in with like our first hour teacher. So I feel like our school is trying to like understand that like just because like they know so many people from there, that it would make sense that you might not be mentally okay, and that it's okay for that, and that we're all here for you, and like that's why we have like our counselors there, that they're there for you to talk to if you really do. And it's more about just Oxford in general, just in general too.
Well, I have a question for you too. Since going back to what Lauren said, when you said that a lot of your peers now you feel are going to get help, and a lot of them don't have judgment to someone who may say that I go to a therapist because of mental health issues. Are majority of those friends African American, or are majority of those friends Caucasian?
Okay, not gonna lie, most of them are like my Caucasian friends, because those are the people that I go to school with. It's like some of my African American friends and friends of color, some of them do see therapists, but most of them don't. But yeah, honestly, with my friends that are like people of color, the people who are like more like closer to like being like in poverty and like not as well off as other people, I feel like they're the ones who don't really go to therapy that often. So I don't know. I don't know. Like, I know that nowadays therapy, you can like talk to anybody like anywhere. There are so many resources, and like most of them are free, but like some of them, I feel like some of their families just don't know that. And a lot of people think, oh, therapy costs money, I can't do that, even though it doesn't 9 times out of 10. And so yeah, a lot of my friends who go see therapists are Caucasian or pretty well off.
Okay.
So why do you think that some people would shy away from therapy or like be afraid to go?
Yeah, like I was saying, I feel like a lot of them think that it costs a lot of money when it really doesn't. And then I also feel that like we said, some of their parents, I feel like some of them think that mental issues aren't real and that they don't need to talk to a therapist about it. And then on another side, I feel like a lot of their parents think that therapists are scammers, even though I think that that is not true. Although there might be some out there, but like a lot of them 9 times out of 10. But yeah, they feel like it's a scam. Some of their parents.
I have a question for you all then too. So now that you say that some of them may think that they are scammers or some of them don't think that it's necessary, do any of you think that sometimes some of them may not go to a therapist because they are scared of the judgment or what they will receive back from their therapist when they go?
Yeah, I was going to bring that up too, because most of the time when somebody thinks there's something wrong and they want somebody to talk to, they wouldn't go to a therapist because it's either they think it's better to go to a stranger because they wouldn't know things in your normal life, or they would think that it's better to talk to somebody you already know because they can relate to what's going on. So if they don't feel comfortable with bringing up all their issues and dumping everything on some stranger that you don't know that well to begin with, then they may not take that pathway to start off.
So do you guys believe that African Americans and Latinos look down on therapy?
Say yeah, because I feel like they are also scared of the judgment that they would get, because you don't really see a lot of like people like that go to therapy in general. So if you're one that actually does go to therapy, you could be scared of like if you tell like your friends or family, like they're like, oh, like what's wrong with you? Like none of us has never had to go on there, and it's just like they can not understand the need for it.
So do you think that a lot of parents, I would say this, do you think that a lot of African American parents tell their child that they don't need therapy, coming from a sake too? Because I know a lot of parents, you guys may know, some parents may say, don't go telling my business, or whatever goes on in this house stays in this house type situation. But it's like, do you feel like a lot of parents keep their child from going to therapy just because they don't want the therapist or the doctor that is there in their business or what goes down in their household that could be affecting you mentally?
Yeah, I feel like that is the case for like some people, definitely not all, but I feel like there definitely are some parents who think like, oh, they don't need to know what's going on in here. We can handle it. This is my household. I don't need anybody else talking. I don't need you talking to anybody else, because don't nobody understand it better than us, because we're the ones who are actually going through it and stuff like that. And I feel like that's where a lot of the misconceptions come in, because like, yes, sometimes it is like easier to talk to it with somebody who's like going through the same things because they know. But then again, they're gonna push, I feel like with that, a lot of the times they push their own experiences onto you, even though it's similar but not the same. One, and two, you guys are completely different people and you have different thought processes, and so the way they deal with it might not work with you, for you. And so I feel like that's where like the outside perspective of the therapist comes in, because they're not related to it at all and they know plenty of mechanisms to help with you going through it and anything that's happening. And so yeah, it just depends.
Would anyone like to add?
All right. I have a question and I want everybody to be able to answer. So if you could tell the older generation, one thing about mental health and mental illness that you think they should know, what would it be? I want to start off with Amare.
It's definitely real, and don't shun people because they can admit that they have it and they have problems and would like to seek help, because it's just going to cause many problems down the line, physical and mental.
Madison.
Say the biggest thing is to not downplay others' personal experiences, because if you don't know what's going on with them, something small to you might not be small to them. So it can change for everyone.
I would say that certain things affect other people differently. Like I feel like many of the older generation think that the younger generation's like soft because we need, therapy and all those things, like some people need it, but it's not that. It's just the fact that everything affects people differently. And some people need to talk it out. Some people handle stuff differently than how I guess you could say their generation would. And it's kind of more common in our generation for them to seek out help instead of just deal with it just mentally, just battling it by themselves.
Yes, I completely agree with that. And like honestly, I think that going and seeking out help is one of the strongest things that you can do. And it is a very powerful move that will definitely help you in the future. And I feel like a lot of like I feel like everybody needs therapy, not even gonna lie. But yeah, like they said, it's definitely real. And like what happened to you may not be the same for them, and so don't push your problems onto them, and just everybody deals with it in their own ways.
Great way to put it, Lauren. So I have one more question for you guys. Is there anything or any mental health issues, like advice that you would give to a peer, or any advice that you would give to an adult on how to go about it with their child outside of just listening to them? Is there any other input that you guys could give?
Okay, so at least with anxiety, because I speak from experience, I feel like you guys need to like we said, talk about it and like definitely listen to your child and like figure out the triggers for that mental illness and like be on the lookout for it with them, because like just because they're the ones going through it, you're also going through it too from the parent perspective, always worrying about your child and everything. And although you're not in their head, you can definitely see them when they're spiraling. And I just feel like you guys just, yeah, be on the lookout for their triggers and their emotions, and like look for when you see them getting to that bad state.
Anyone
Anybody
else?
else want to add to that real quick?
I would just say, yeah, definitely just making sure you also notice it, like she said, because if somebody always gets sad or anxious about a certain thing, I would always say just to like make sure that if you notice it, like comfort them and try to make sure that like you make them feel like they're like safe and all that. If it's like a panic attack or something like that, just to make sure that they're like loved and stuff.
Sure, you know the best way to come back to them when they need help and how to provide for them when they want you to come and help them out is something big that you should know.
Or like for depression, I think some parents need to understand that your kid's not always going to be able to just brush it off or get going. Like they're going to have, with depression, you're going to struggle to be able to move some days, and parents need to understand that to not make it worse.
Well, thank you, Amare. Thank you, Lauren and Madison and Jamari, for your input on mental health. So a lot of things that a lot of kids go through. And I'm pretty sure that all of us can attest that we have all been through anxiety and depression at one point of our lives. But I do thank you guys for coming on here and giving your input. But thank you for putting your input in on that. And thank you for joining us this evening. We are going to give a list of resources, and we will see all of you in 30 seconds. Welcome back, everyone, to the Ascend Foundation Truth Youth Coalition Mental Health Forum. I am your host, Michaela.
And I'm Brian, and we would like to introduce two professionals today, Miss Melanie Woods and Mr. Tyler Logan. How are you guys doing today?
Pretty well. Thank you for having us.
Yes, I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Would you guys like to introduce yourselves really quickly?
You go ahead, Dr. Woods.
Okay. So I'm Melanie Woods. I'm a primary care provider. I have a special interest in empowering the vulnerable population, which of course that encompasses kids and teens.
And my name is Tyler Logan. I am currently a health equity project manager with the CDC Foundation. I was also born and raised in Pontiac, Michigan. And a quick fun fact, I'm the class president of Pontiac High's class of 2013. We were the first class to actually go there as freshmen, all the way through each 4 years and graduate as seniors.
Okay, I see you. Well, I want to thank both of you for being here today and talking it and chopping it up with us. So with no further ado, we'll get into the questions. I'll do this one for Dr. Woods. What is it that you have seen as a challenge with dealing with mental health and challenges among the youth?
The biggest challenge is denial. So the first step in getting help is admitting, that I have an issue or that I need help. A lot of times the youth or teens are quiet. They isolate. They do a lot of introspection, but introspection, it can be good, but it can also go very, very bad. So the biggest challenge is just getting it out, having people open their mouth. And another challenge, our panel, you guys had a phenomenal panel, by the way, is what they touched on. The parents can be barriers because the parents will sometimes brush it off or they don't make time to even open up the conversation with youth.
Mr. Tyler Logan, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, in addition to that, what I would say is that sometimes it's not necessarily even just identifying that you have a problem, but I feel like as youth, and when we say youth, we're thinking of teenagers all the way up through maybe ages 24, which is pretty standard. But especially if you're looking at the younger side of that spectrum, you're 13, 14, 15, you may not even realize that you're having a mental health episode or experiencing that to even identify it. So I think in addition to what Dr. Woods said, sometimes youth don't even know that they're experiencing mental health challenges. And then once they do experience that, oftentimes, as we see the rates for Black youth, especially with mental health issues increasing, actually accessing the resources for that is decreasing. And that may be for different reasons. Maybe it's misinformation, so people aren't encouraged, but that could also be because they just don't know that these resources exist, especially in certain counties, depending on where you stay.
And would it be safe to agree that adults are creating a more challenging barrier for the youth to address these mental health issues?
I would say that adults aren't necessarily creating a more challenging barrier, but are definitely one of the barriers for youth in regards to mental health. And that's for different reasons. You all touched on some of this earlier. I think the primary one may just be the cultural significance and background, how you all mentioned in Black communities, we don't really talk about this. And that doesn't necessarily mean that youth aren't talking about it. I think it's really more so the older generations, because if you look at youth currently today compared to youth back in the day, a few years ago, I feel like youth today are a little bit more progressive in that mental health space and a little bit more open, which is really the biggest piece of that conversation, is having dialogue, just starting it. So as we continue to just move forward, we might see that be massaged out a little bit more. And even today, we're seeing parents jump on board more and having some of these discussions, but I still think that that's one of the primary barriers, is just engaging in dialogue with parents about that.
I agree. And also, you guys touched on it earlier, parents don't want to admit, or they think that if your child has a mental health issue, then something is wrong. And they don't want anything to be wrong with my child. So they brush it off, go talk to the pastor, you'll get better, go sleep it off, do some other things and you'll be happy tomorrow. because there is a negative connotation to mental health or depression, anxiety, and we really need to learn to deal with it. A lot of my population is Hispanic, as you know, as well. I see a little bit of everybody, but it's the same in the Hispanic population. And one person on your panel mentioned that they think adults might view them as being weak if they sought out mental health, help. And that is true. I find that with a lot of my Hispanic populations, is that's just something that they don't want to talk about at all because it is viewed as a weakness.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so moving on to our next question that I have for both of you. What should parents, or let's say the child personally, what should they look out for when it comes to mental health? What are the signs? What are something that they should notice?
I'll take this one first. There is a great resource and everybody can access it online. We use it in the medical environment to screen for depression. It is a PHQ-9. That's just one screening tool, and everybody can get online and look for it and complete it. It asks 9 very intentional questions. Do you feel down or depressed? Do you feel hopeless? Do you have trouble sleeping? It may be too much or too little. Is there a change in your eating pattern? That's just a few of the questions. Do you have little interest or pleasure in doing things? And when you think about this, even when you're looking at your friends, if you say, well, so-and-so used to love to do this, and now they don't anymore, that's one of the red flags. Sometimes you can look at your friends and say, he used to get his haircut every week. He hasn't had a haircut in months. Maybe there's some hygiene, some things that you all can look for. One of the most important questions on that PHQ-9 is, do you feel that you're a harm to yourself or someone else? Or do you feel like you would be better off not being here? So those are things to look for. That would be one basic resource everybody can use, and it is available.
Mr. Logan?
Dr. Woods really hit that one right on the head. I would just say overall, just looking at the change in patterns, similar to what she was saying, if you see that something's out of ordinary, maybe they're not going to basketball practice as much or dance practice, or they're not hopping on the game in Xbox, Call of Duty, or PS5, whatever you want. It's missing them, right? So seeing like where those patterns are changing and figuring out like, is this a mental health episode? Are they experiencing something that I may reach out and just ask how I could be supportive? That's a really good next step.
So as a teen or as a young adult, say I'm going through some mental health issues myself, what are some tips you would give me to ease the pain and deal with it? And any of you can answer the question first.
I'll start with this one, but please fill in some of my gaps, Dr. Woods. I think that this can be unpacked differently because self-care is the easiest answer to at least say. I feel like you should at least see what type of resources are in the community, but also what you like to do as self-care. And a lot of that looks different, right? So resources may be in the community as far as, have you all heard of CMHs? They're community mental health agencies. Essentially, a CMH acts as the mental health department, if you will, of that community. So they have a plethora of resources available to youth, to families. Some of them are based off of your insurance. Some of them are just free. You don't necessarily need insurance to get them. So there are community resources available. There are also school resources available. So what does therapy or counseling services look like in your school? Maybe some schools have peer support groups as well. And then lastly, your peers are another perfect resource that you can reach out to and just talk to some of them about that. Sometimes youth feel more comfortable talking to other youth about this. I mean, you all are doing a perfect example of like what this can look like and how dialogue can go amongst youth in this space. So just exploring those different areas and seeing what works best for you, in addition to seeing what self-care looks like for you. So you may like to listen to music when you get stressed out or jump on the game. You may like to go work out Some people like to dance. Some people literally like to unplug and do nothing but binge watch Netflix. Like whatever self-care looks like, kind of tap into those different elements.
Mrs. Wood?
Mr. Logan.
Yeah, I think Mr. Logan, you hit that one out the park. That was perfect. The biggest thing I could say, when those things don't work, when you're like, I'm doing these things and I'm not recovering, open your mouth. Tell somebody. And if you don't want to open your mouth, I tell my patients this all the time. Write a letter. You might have to slide a letter to your parents. If you're feeling some type of way about opening your mouth and saying, hey, I'm feeling some type of way, something is wrong. I'm feeling bad. If you can't say it, write it out.
Mm-hmm. That's real good, Dr. Woods, especially if it's not even necessarily a letter to someone, but maybe you're journaling. Journaling is one of the best resources for really just getting this out, because sometimes keeping it in our heads jumbles it up, but when you write it out, you're able to put those puzzle pieces together.
That's right.
Thank you, because I do that a lot. Thank you for that. So let's say I'm just normal kid. I have my own mental health issues, but how can me, myself, help my peers who are also having mental health issues or breakdowns?
Be an active listener. So listen. And you have to listen with an open mind, not be judgmental. And when you find that it has gone too far beyond your expertise, ask for help on their behalf. You may have, if someone ever tells you anything that insinuates I'm a harm to myself or a danger to someone else, that is a medical emergency. You have to tell someone. Okay? So once it gets beyond I call it expertise, because what I saw a few minutes ago was a panel of experts. So once it gets beyond your expertise, ask for help on their behalf.
Okay.
I would agree 100%. In addition to that, if it isn't something that's as serious as something that's self-harming, sometimes it's best. Oh, let me take this back. Have you ever had friends where you may just want to talk something out, or at least just get something off your chest? Maybe not even necessarily want their opinion or feedback on it, but just want to get it out. And as you're talking, they're sitting here giving you all of this feedback, telling you what you're doing wrong, what you're doing right. Sometimes it's important to take a step back in situations like that. And if you're that individual who's just running off and spitting things out, take a step back and ask, maybe that's not what they want. How can I be supportive, right? So if you do find yourself in that situation and the friend is coming to you, talking about something that they're dealing with, whether it's a mental health, substance abuse episode, etc., I'm really asking how you can be supportive in that space may be the best question, because they may just want you to be a listening ear. They may just want you to respond to a certain point, or see if they're doing something right or wrong and give some feedback. So really figuring out what it is they're looking for may help you help them a little better.
Well, thank you.
So, as our event is coming to a conclusion sometime soon, could you guys, being experts, tell us what you deem as being the most important factor that we as kids, as youth, need to know as we look to help in this fight against mental health?
I'll start this one off. I'll say be aware of your resources, nurture your relationships, and that's across the board, not just with your parents. And that relationships don't necessarily just mean your partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, etc., but it also includes your friendships. It includes your relationships with your siblings. Like, figure out where those relationships can be built up at, because you likely will fall on some of those people if you do have any mental health needs, because a lot of your support comes from your community. So nurture those relationships. And then again, keep an eye out for any changes in patterns or behavior. If you find yourself wanting to sleep 18 hours a day throughout the entire week, something's up, right? So really take a step back and look at yourself, or look at some of your peers and see if something may be going on in that regard. And then lastly, make sure you're just speaking out. Don't hesitate to speak out if you need help. Don't hesitate to have these conversations with people you trust. And especially sometimes it can be hard, but especially with your parents or guardians, because It may even be harder for them to have some of these conversations, believe it or not, because they didn't grow up the same way that we did, or even have as much mental health resources that we have today. So some of those conversations may be easily had or initiated even on our end or your end as youth.
I think it's important to know that it's okay to ask for help. It doesn't make you weird. It doesn't make you wrong. It doesn't make you different. It's okay to ask for help. We are looking at you all, to change the narrative, change how it was for us growing up. Because, like Mr. Logan says, it may be difficult for your parents or for you to talk to your parents about it, mainly because your parents didn't grow up the way you're growing up. It wasn't as open, we didn't talk about it, but you guys are. You can change the narrative from here on out for the generations to come. And we're dependent on you guys to do that. So just, it's very important that you know that it's okay.
I completely agree. And I think sometimes the older generations, they kind of don't see the fact that we're growing up completely different from how they were. It's a completely different time now. And I agree with you. I just feel like we all need to listen to each other to be able to make this thing work. So I want to thank both of our professionals today for being here and talking to us, and quite frankly, giving us some great words of wisdom. I want to thank you both. And I'll hand things over to Michaela.
Well, thank you for your
My
input,
pleasure.
Mrs. Woods and Mr. Logan. But we are going to give a very, very warm welcome and round of applause to the president and CEO of CNS Healthcare, Mr. Michael Garrett. Hello, Mr. Garrett. How are you?
Hello, how are you, Michaela? And great job, Michaela and Brian, on this forum. I'm Michael Garrett, President and CEO of CNS Healthcare. We're one of the larger providers of behavioral health care services in Southeastern Michigan. I had this speech prepared, but I want to say how proud I am and how floored I am by the outstanding job that you young folks did on this panel. So I'm going to give you congratulations from me because this is the best meeting, quite frankly, that I've had and seen this week. And I sit in on a lot of meetings every week. But I want to tell you and let everyone on this stream know the CNS Healthcare is a provider of mental health care services. And someone mentioned earlier about one of the barriers to seeking mental health treatment is the stigma involved because no one wants to be labeled anything negative for seeking mental health treatment and the cost. Well, I'm here to tell you that CNS Healthcare is a recipient of some very special federal money. So that means that anybody that comes to see us, comes to our doors, we can provide you mental health care services, whether you have insurance or not, and regardless of your place of residence or where you live. So I would love if you can pass that information on to your friends, to your family, to your acquaintances, and let them know that CNS Healthcare, who we've been doing business in the Pontiac area and surrounding areas for over 22 years, is ready, willing, and able to help people, or just to listen if you need someone to talk to about what's going on in your lives or your family's lives. We have offices in Waterford on Summit Drive, and we have one in Pontiac at 1841 North Perry Street. So we're very easy to get to. And if you need to, just give us a call and we'd be very glad to help. Again, I had this speech prepared, but this is one of the best things I've ever heard. I echo the sentiments of Dr. Woods. The youth is the future. You're going to be the ones to finally change the conversation about mental health care in this country. So oftentimes we as parents think it's our job to teach our kids things, but sometimes it's the kids' jobs to teach the parents and the grandparents things. So I look forward to hopefully more of these forums and continue doing exactly what you're doing, which is leading. And your generation is going to be the one to finally change the dynamic on this and move the needle. And I am exceptionally proud of all of you on this panel and everyone that's listening. So thank you very much. And I'll turn it back over to Michaela and Brian. Job well done.
Thank you, Mr. Garrett. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Everybody on our Facebook and YouTube family, we want to thank everybody for coming out and joining us on our second forum. We're looking forward to the third one coming up very soon. For all the information that we had today, we will have the info on the screen. And once again, we want to thank you guys for taking some time out of your day and watching our forum. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Pontiac. I just want to say on behalf of the Clarence Phillips Ascend Foundation, T.R.U.T.H Coalition, as well as CNS Healthcare, we are proud to be able to bring you this event this evening, something that we think is absolutely crucial and important to make sure we get a full understanding of what's truly taking place out here in the world of mental health, especially amongst our children. Right now, we're living in a truly trying time where there's so much uncertainty taking place out here, where it is our job to get a better understanding of how we need to go ahead and be in place to make sure our kids are going to be taken care of and they're going to be covered. And that's the reason why we have this event here this evening. We have some amazing kids that we have that's going to be joining us on this computer screen tonight, and they're going to go ahead and try and give us a good educational lesson, a master class on mental health. And also, too, to go ahead and make sure we truly capture the whole dynamic of the evening, we wanted to go ahead and make sure we brought you two absolute professionals this evening. Those professionals are going to be Dr. Melanie Woods as well as Mr. Tyler Logan. Both of them are going to go ahead and be able to give you a professional side of what's taking place out here from a mental health standpoint, and also to some of the things that we need to be aware of as we look to move forward to fight through some of these mental health challenges. So with all that being said, we want you to go ahead and sit back, enjoy the evening. Please feel free to share and invite everybody in humanly imaginable, because we want everyone to go ahead and share in this educational lesson. And please open up your mind and make sure we listen to our kids, because their voice absolutely matters in this, and they're going to go ahead and let us know some of the things that we think that we know that we need to know a little bit more about. So everybody sit back and enjoy.